Transitioning into a low-carb or keto diet can be one of the toughest things when it comes down to cravings. Honestly, it's one of the biggest barriers that ever keeps people from starting a keto diet or a low-carb lifestyle to begin with. Now, what we have to understand here is that hunger is survival. Cravings are psychological. And if we start understanding that, we can understand the kind of foods that we need to eat in order to get the best response and control our cravings. Hey, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you can see new videos every single Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, and hit that little bell button to turn on notifications so you never miss a beat. All right, so if we understand how the brain works in terms of its reward system and its dopamine response, we can have a much better understanding overall. You see, every time we consume carbohydrates, we have a little bit of a dopamine reward system response. This means that we feel good, we get this sort of little invigorating feeling every time we eat them, even if it's kind of subconscious. And then once that feeling goes away, we start craving it again. This is a very simple dopamine response. And because carbohydrates elicit such a strong response with this, when you start cutting them out as you're going into a keto or low carb diet, you can have really intense cravings. And it can make you throw in the towel before you ever get to reap the benefits of a low carb lifestyle. The other thing you need to be aware of is that the more carbohydrates you've eaten in your past life or even recently, the stronger your cravings are going to be, simply because you've downregulated your dopamine receptors. So it's something to be aware of, but don't be alarmed because there's a lot of things that you can do to control this, and I'm going to give you the answers in just a second. The first thing that we have to focus on is dopamine control through the proper foods. Okay? And one of the things that you want to be consuming a lot of is an amino acid known as tyrosine. Now, tyrosine isn't just something that you have to go and get a supplement. Tyrosine is something that is contained in a lot of specific kinds of proteins. Now, when you're transitioning into a low-carb or keto lifestyle, some of the things that I feel you should eat and that you'll get the best benefit from when it comes down to that tyrosine effect is going to be things like cottage cheese, things like higher fat content fish, but also pumpkin seeds. Believe it or not, pumpkin seeds contain a whole lot of tyrosine and can really cause a very powerful effect when it comes down to craving control. You see, here's how it works. When it comes down to our dopamine receptors, we have to actually create dopamine through a specific process in the body. And tyrosine is at the forefront of that. So tyrosine, the amino acid, ends up converting into what is known as L-DOPA. Once we have L-DOPA is acted upon by specific enzymes within the body. These specific enzymes turn it into dopamine. Now, the specific thing that is acting upon the L-DOPA is known as aromatic amino decarboxylase. The name's not that important, but all we need to know is that that decarboxylase affects the specific process in how we create that good feeling in our brain. So if we give it the fuel that it needs by eating foods that are rich in tyrosine, we can significantly combat those cravings. Now, an extra bonus that you can do is consume something known as velvet beans. Okay, velvet beans contain L-DOPA in them already. That means you're skipping the whole tyrosine step. You're eating these beans, which aren't very high in carbohydrates, mind you, and they are going to convert directly into dopamine as long as you have the enzymatic pathway present and available. The next tip that I want to talk about is utilizing something known as Glucomannan Fiber, more specifically from a company known as NuPasta. Now, NuPasta really has a monopoly on this because they are the ones that are really paving the way with Glucomannan Fiber research. See, what NuPasta is it's a pasta that is formed from something known as the konjac root. Okay, this konjac root comes from Japan and Korea, and it's grown at a higher altitude, so it doesn't have any starch, but it has something known as glucomannan fiber. And if you've heard of glucomannan fiber before, you've probably heard of it in diabetes journals because it's so effective at modulating blood sugar. But when it comes down to a keto diet or when it comes down to a low-carb lifestyle, it makes a huge difference when it comes to our ghrelin response. You see, glucomannan fiber has the ability to hold up to 50 times its weight in water. That means it swells significantly. That means that you get a very satiated feeling that can blunt the ghrelin response. Ghrelin is the hormone that tells your brain that you're hungry. So when you're full, the reason you're full is because ghrelin is telling your brain that you're full. So if you can sort of game the system by having a very high fiber, high soluble fiber that's going to allow you to feel full, you're not going to have those cravings anymore. What's interesting is if you look at Glucomannan Fiber and you look at NuPasta, if you add just a little bit of water to even a small amount of it, you're going to have it turn into a gel. And at first this sounds kind of scary. Like, why would you want it to turn into a gel? That sounds scary. But it's not a chemical gel. It's literally just a very fibrous water-soluble gel, which not only makes you satiated, but it also helps transport cholesterol out of the body. So this is a double whammy in a good way. If you're someone that's starting a keto diet or you're introducing yourself to a low-carb diet or your family and they're concerned or you're concerned about higher levels of cholesterol, well then this can solve that issue. Glucomannan fiber can carry the extra cholesterol from the diet and get it out of the body if you're concerned about that. but we need some science to back this up. There was a study that was published in the Diabetes Research Clinical Practice Journal. Okay, and what this study took a look at was the effect of glucomannan fiber on glucose. So what they did is they gave glucomannan fiber to subjects along with glucose. And what they found is that even when combined with carbohydrates, it reduced the ghrelin response after eating. So that means that there was less ghrelin affecting the body throughout the rest of the day. But they also found that over the course of 4 weeks, fasted ghrelin levels dropped in those that were consuming the glucomannan fiber. So that means that even just over time, you can reduce the overall amount of ghrelin that signals your brain to make you hungry simply by adding this into the diet. That's pretty awesome. Now again, New Pasta has sort of a monopoly on this in a good way. They're the ones that are paving the way. They're the ones that have the research, and they're the ones that are harvesting the actual root. So I encourage you to check them out. You can see them in the description below and also get a special discount. A little bit can go a long way when it comes to this stuff. Honestly, it's something that you're going to end up wanting to have in your arsenal when it comes down to your long-term keto lifestyle as well. But transitioning to keto, it makes all the difference in the world. Now, let's roll into the next one, artificial sweeteners. I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to consume artificial sweeteners long-term on keto. I just know that it's a huge, huge crutch for a lot of people. And in a lot of ways, it's how people get through a low-carb lifestyle to begin with. But when you're transitioning into a keto diet or a low-carb diet, I highly, highly recommend that you keep the artificial sweeteners out, at least for that 1, 2, or 3 week period as you're transitioning. Why? Because remember the dopamine receptors I talked about? Well, artificial sweeteners are proven to affect our dopamine centers in our brain in the same way that sugar does, meaning that once the dopamine levels fall, we're going to crave anything that's going to satisfy that dopamine itch, meaning we're not necessarily going to crave more artificial sweeteners. We might crave real sugar, or we might crave other fats or excess calories. So there's some studies that back this up as well. Neuroscientists at Yale Medical School actually found that by consuming artificial sweeteners, it had the same kind of effect on reduced and downregulated dopamine receptors as regular sugar did, proving that yes, the cravings come back and they come back with a vengeance. But there's another study that takes us a step further. This study was published in the Journal of Cell Metabolism, and it looked at fruit flies. Okay, yeah, don't think I'm totally crazy when I'm talking about a study that looks at fruit flies. Fruit flies are often used in studies simply because they have a shorter lifespan, but their metabolism and DNA is actually quite similar to humans. So they're used because they get us a viable result in a shorter period of time. So this study took a look at fruit flies that consumed either yeast and sucrose, so basically sugar, or fruit flies that consumed artificial sweeteners. And what they found is that the fruit flies that consumed the artificial sweeteners ended up consuming 30% more calories than the flies that consumed sucrose. Why? Because their dopamine reward system was so downregulated that they needed to overcompensate by consuming extra calories to satisfy, again, that dopamine urge. Pretty powerful stuff. So when it comes down to transitioning to keto, the few things you need to know: the right kind of proteins, the right kind of tyrosine, the amino acids, okay, and the velvet beans here and there. Then also the New Pasta, the Glucomannan Fiber, going to be a great transitional tool and a long-term tool to keep in your arsenal, and keep the artificial sweeteners out of the equation. As always, please keep it locked in here on my channel. And you can get that special discount on New Pasta down below, simply in the description. I'll see you in the next video, and comment if you have ideas for future videos.